My name is Joshua Bennett. I'm the Mellon Assistant Professor of English and Creative Writing here at Dartmouth. And welcome to Converging Pandemics, Black Life in a State of Emergency. Just going to quickly read the bios. Esther Armah is Executive Director of the Armah Institute of Emotional Justice, which provides emotionality education in the context of race, gender, and culture using the emotional justice framework by developing projects, devising training, and engaging in thought leadership. AIEJ works across New York, London, and Accra. Esther is an award-winning international journalist, a playwright, and an international public speaker. She has lived and worked in New York, Washington, D.C., London, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. As a journalist, she has worked for the BBC in London, was a radio host in New York with Pacifica Radio's WBAI, and has appeared on MSNBC, CNN, and BET. She has written 5 plays that have been produced and performed in New York, Chicago, and Accra. As a public speaker on emotional justice, she has appeared at Stanford, NYU, and Kenya's African Women in Media Conference and Festival.
I am okay. I'm okay. I'm good. Really. I'm good. In this moment of pandemic, police brutality, and protests, so many organizations, corporations, white progressive, white allies, so many people seek and expect coherent argument, clear analysis, cogent argument about what this moment represents. I don't know what it means for you. I want to talk to you about what it means for us. When I say us, I'm sitting in Accra, in the capital of Ghana. When I heard about Breonna Taylor and the no-knock warrant, it took me back to 1997 when I was in the townships of South Africa. And I listened to Black women talk about the way police officers would bust into their homes, shooting and firing and killing. And that was part of policing. That was apartheid South Africa. In 2020, we are seeing on the streets of American cities what happened during the height of apartheid. We are a global Black people with an inheritance of white supremacist terrorism, masquerading as law and order. We've had this consistent expectation that somehow mainstream media or spectators or commentators will be able to ask you the question, so talk about the future. Talk about what this is going to look like. I want to ask Black people all over the world, when you watched the video, how did you sleep that night? When you closed your eyes, what did you see? Could you get up the next morning? Did you manage to feed your kids if you have children? How did you get out the door? When you took a breath, could you take a second one? Did it take you twice as long to leave your house or get to work or get to your desk or do whatever your new normal has become as a result of COVID? What did you do? What did you do? I was incoherent with rage, pain, heartbreak, and devastation. I watched a 500-year history, the legacies of colonialism, enslavement, and apartheid explode in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And then I watched people well-meaning with a politics that they define as progressive or liberal or somehow ideologically friendly to what it means to be Black, ask questions that were unloving, unjust, and inhumane. It is an unloving thing to do to ask a people who have been witness to their own death for 500 years if they're okay? What do you imagine the answer would be? What do you imagine how do you imagine people respond? People were terrified about the mobilization to protest, to move from homes where people had been contained and restricted over 3 months, focused on a set of stories about a pandemic. And from there, the set of violences of watching Gregory McMichaels and Travis McMichaels and William Roddy Bryan chase down Ahmaud Arbery, making you feel like you'd literally gone back into a civil rights era moment. That's literally what I felt like I was watching. To then Breonna Taylor, whose name too many people still don't know, in between Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. For me, it's my cousin Aaron's birthday. My cousin Aaron is about the same height as George Floyd. And beautiful, deep, deep chocolate-skinned brother. And I saw family members in his body. And I thought about the Black men that I know, that I love, that I have loved, that I have left me, that have hurt me, that have healed me, that have moved me. And I wondered how people expect any coherence from witnessing that level of trauma, not in the moment of 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but understanding you're witnessing a living history in that moment. That's what the world saw. So across Africa, here in Accra, the president spoke George Floyd's name. And in the W.E.B. Du Bois Center, there is an entire memorial to George Floyd's name. The Dahomey, who are a tribe in West Africa, created an entire burning ceremony against the police officers who took his life, held his name up, held up the name of his mother in the way of the ancestors. In New Zealand, they danced a haka for George Floyd. We watched a global outpouring, and people spoke about how transformative this moment was. Understand that what is transformative for a global white reality is profoundly traumatizing for global Black people. And my work, the work of our institute, is specifically about emotional justice. Why? The new normal requires us to foreground, center, and privilege the healing of Black people in individual, institutional, organizational, ideological ways. And it requires us to put that same level of effort into the dismantling for white folks. We have two specific jobs under this work that we call emotional justice. Why do we call it emotional justice? It's about a framework that is, that explores, that interrogates the legacy of untreated trauma that is the result of our global history of colonialism, of apartheid, of enslavement. And for me, as a Black woman who claims New York as home, specifically Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, where I lived for 8 years, who claims London as home, where I was born and I have family, claims Accra as home, where my father was an activist in independence. That continuum of history has taught me that as a global Black people, we cannot continue to have this most intimate relationship with violence and stay sane. It is a physical impossibility. So there are different questions that we have to ask. And I remember the reason I specifically refer to South Africa and Breonna Taylor is because in South Africa, when the men of the African National Congress were incarcerated, the police force, the government, the apartheid government said, that's it, the movement's dead. Because in so many ways, across so many borders, people underestimate Black women. So they were absolutely astounded at the speed, the organization, the strategy of Black South African women to bring that movement back together, hold it up, and move it in all these directions that they simply could not track, understand, or engage. And Black women paid the price, and Black men paid the price. When I talk about healing, There is no 12-step program to deal with 500 years of trauma. The 500 years and all the movement work that was done to move nations inches towards some semblance of justice, social justice, civil rights, the kind of legislation that enables the kind of representation that allows us to gather in the ways that we gather now. All of that work, all of that movement work was crucial. It was monumental, and it enabled the kind of motion that would never have otherwise happened. But in this moment, for this moment, we must be focused on this work of emotional justice. That is because in the same way that Black bodies are political, the spirits and the hearts of Black people are as well. And we are a people for whom injustice has been the most permanent relationship when it comes to the worlds in which we occupy. And so the idea of the heart of a Black man, of a Black woman, of a Black trans man, of a Black trans woman, of LGBTQ Black folk, the idea that that is not political cannot be our truth. But we must attach justice to our emotionality, because this is not the work solely of individual effort. This is not about emotional resilience that makes the institutions no longer responsible for the cancer that they create, that they profit from. Emotional justice is a framework that is about organizational change, and the work we specifically created for this time is called the Emotional Justice Truth and Accountability Sessions. Why? Again, rooting it in a global Black reality. I remember being in South Africa for the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. I remember sitting across the desk from Desmond Tutu, who spoke specifically privately about the forgiveness that he thought white people were taking for granted. I remember sitting with and speaking to the widow of Steve Biko, who took her oldest son with her to these hearings and told this phalanx of global media who were enthralled to this Black forgiveness of white supremacist terror and saw it as something extraordinary. And then I listened to Black women say, no, we ain't doing that. We're not having it. We don't forgive you anything. And you don't have the right to call on a national forgiveness on behalf of an entire people. I remember Steve Biko's widow said to me, I want to talk to you about rage, because that's the thing that helps me get up in the morning. I bring my son because he must not learn that the forgiveness of white supremacist terror is any path to any kind of equity, justice, or peace. It will not work that way, and we will not have it. And I remember listening to her and saying, so what is the future that you want to create? And she said, I want people to understand that the heart of a Black woman, the heart of a Black man, the heart of a Black child requires a justice beyond the political, the social, and the civil. From those conversations, that work, and those spaces, we created an emotional justice. It also, for me, is profoundly personal. I'm the daughter of an activist who then worked in the government of Kwame Nkrumah. And my family lived through the military coups. The military coups of Ghana in 66 and in 79 and in 82. What happened with those soldiers is what happened when I listened to the story of Breonna Taylor and the no-knock warrant and the way the same police bust into that space. This is a history that has a face and a name and an emotion. So for the idea that it becomes a moment because the protests are multicultural, are symptomatic of how inhumane the relationship is between the power, the government, the state, and Black people. Because it's never been enough for Black people alone to flood the streets in agony, in protest, in rage, uplifting and upholding their ancestors, the names of their loved ones. It's never been enough. It becomes transformative because white people participate. Part of what emotional justice requires us to do is the conversations we absolutely do not want to have are the only conversations that we are required to have. The path to the kind of equity that we claim that we want, the new normal that we have consistently articulated that we are now willing to work for, requires us to have the combination of truth and accountability. The truth for global Black people is healing is the work of this generation, because the labor to build the superpowers of this world in Europe, in America, the modernization within Africa has all come from enslaved Black labor of one kind or another. We don't know what a healed global Black people might build. We don't know that reality because we haven't lived it. So that is the thing that we have to stand up on its feet and make real in this moment. Without that kind of reality, it is not that all the work of the demands regarding justice are any less relevant, but that we must foreground what it means to be well, to be Black, to be living, to be breathing, to be working, and to be dying. And we have not had the opportunity to do that work because we literally cannot catch a breath over 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So what does change feel like? It feels, for white progressives, for white allies, it will feel like trauma, because to dismantle systems requires that you step outside of the center. And you don't know what it means to step outside of the center, because the only occupation you know when it comes to anything to do with race and Blackness is the center. So to step out of it is going to feel like trauma. With emotional justice, we say that that is your issue to deal with and it is your trauma to heal. That cannot be the work of Black folk. But for Black folk, what does it mean to center your wellness? How do you identify it? What does that sound, feel, or look like? What kinds of resources are required? What kind of organizational reform would you do? What kind of cultural realities would we change? That, for me, is our work. It is the future, and it is the honoring of the ancestors for whom the unshed tears of the Middle Passage are part of the wailing and the raging and the breathing and the crying for this moment. So when you next go to ask somebody Black if they're okay, I want you to sit in the idea that the work of emotional justice requires you to understand what we call emotional patriarchy. Emotional patriarchy is a system that bows and caters to the feelings of white men, first and foremost. So you have a politics that requires affirmation, applause, and appreciation when you do have anything to do with Blackness. So to dismantle that centering is going to feel like a trauma for you, but that is what's required if you say you're committed to justice. So I'll just close with, for all of us who are committed to justice, and for every single Black person on this planet, emotional justice is ours. Our work is to heal in ways that will feel hurtful and harmful, because we also don't know what it means to center your wellness and to pause, because you literally don't know what it means to put another step forward. You actually don't even know what to do. And so you may stand and feel rooted, not in strength, not even in confusion, but in incoherence, while somebody asks you to be coherent about your incoherence. That is traumatizing. It is unjust and it is unloving. There are other ways we have to learn to engage and communicate. So for me, our future is emotional justice. Thank you.